Let's talk about another far more controversial story from this week, though. Let's move over to the Repco Supercar Championship, which last week at Mount Panorama announced its 2025 schedule. We'll see 13 race weekends next year. Bathurst 500s off the menu, with the new season kicking off February 21st, 23rd at Sydney Motorsports Park. After that, goes to Albert Park, teams up with F1 in March, then a trip over to New Zealand in Taupo? Am I pronouncing that right? I think I'm pronouncing it right. Taupo. Thank you. Then off to Tasmania in May. There we got 2 races in June, going to Perth and Darwin, and then a return to Townsville in July. Paperclip is back. First time since 2019. Queensland Raceway returns to conclude the sprint races, and that's on August 8th to 10th. September 12th to 14th, endurance racing season kicks off at the Bend, and then the big one, October 9th to 12th, Bathurst 1000 returns on the same weekend. And then after that, wraps up the 2025 season with 3 huge race weekends at Gold Coast, Sandown, and Adelaide. Chat a bit about why these final 3 races will be a little bit more significant next year, but all graphics in this segment are courtesy of Supercars. Kobe, Matt, we satisfied with what we're seeing so far?
Yeah, I'm mostly satisfied with the 2025 schedule. Like you say, Jackson, we're gonna talk about the controversial part of the schedule in just a little while, and I'm sure a lot of people, especially our own Ben Snyder in the chat room, will be the one who's most fired up about this. But looking at the schedule in general, I'm first gonna say I am very happy that we're not having the Bathurst 500 next year.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah. I just don't know, but it just feels, considering what the Bathurst 1000 is, it doesn't feel right to me to be racing at this track twice in the same year. I feel like it should just be the Bathurst 1000 and leave it at that, rather than having a sprint race weekend around Mount Panorama. I mean, it's nice to see them race at Mount Panorama and all that, but I'd rather they save that for the great race. And obviously adding an additional round to next year's schedule is always great, because the drivers always complain that we're not racing enough, and that's why they decide to go overseas, race other categories, or even stay within the country, like racing something like GT World Challenge Australia, or even go to race. I've seen some of the drivers racing GT World Challenge Asia, and Chaz Monster, he's actually just getting back to Australia in the last couple of weeks, because he just competed in the IMSA race at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway road course. Yeah, so because the drivers are not racing as much as they like, they decide to go race other things. And if you're going to, and if you want to try to keep them, over here more often and all of that, instead of looking elsewhere, the best thing to do is to try to add more races. But at the same time, Supercars is trying to keep costs down and all of that, because if you're running too many rounds and all that, then the budget goes way high, and then you're going to run into problems. But yeah, I think Supercars did a really good job with this schedule. I know in the future they want to try to go to international rounds away from Australia and New Zealand. It would be nice for them to come to the United States and race. Hopefully we can see that again, just like we saw them race at COTA, over a decade ago and all of that. But what they got now, I think they did the best that they could given the circumstances. Yeah, it's got some interesting changes here. Happy to see Queensland's Raceway back on the schedule. And interesting that Sandown is moving, after Bathurst towards the end of the year, and Sydney Motorsport Park. Usually see that, in the summertime in the Northern Hemisphere, but now is moving that to the very first race at the beginning of the season over there at Sydney. So that's quite an interesting change. But overall, I thought Supercars did a solid job. And Adam Limbery says, love seeing Queensland Raceway back on the Supercar schedule because it's an awesome track. Yeah, it truly is. What do you think, Matt?
Well, positives on this is Queensland coming back is great, and Tony Quinn has pumped a load of money into that place and upgraded it since the pandemic, basically, has got it back ship shape again, which is really good. If we can get Winton back on the calendar, then that would be excellent as another sort of traditional country round for Australia. So they're the positives. You mentioned, Kobe, that we heard it a lot earlier in the year about them talking about going to Singapore to be there with the Grand Prix. I don't think that one's going to happen because it's too close to Bathurst, and it's in the middle of endurance season. I don't like. Obviously, it hasn't happened yet because we've never had a 500-kilometer race at the Bend, but we're going to get one next year. It hasn't been on the schedule this year. They've had a year off, and it comes back to be the 500k Bathurst Enduro. So, I mean, it's one of those tracks that's great for probably to drive round, but as a spectator or TV spectator in our cases, I don't think it's going to be great for a 500k race, but we'll see what happens. All this talk about Sandown over the last couple of years is that we're going to lose Sandown altogether because it's going to be turned into a housing estate. Hasn't happened yet, so we should be going there for the 500 like we did a few weeks ago. Interesting what, it's moved into that where there was a gap between Gold Coast, which is on its always traditional end of October date, and Adelaide. So that's interesting. Talk about more about that in a minute. The good thing is with all of this is we're going to get more or less practice and more racing. All of these early rounds up until the Bend are going to be 3 races per weekend rather than the 2, apart from the Grand Prix, which is 4 sprint races. But we're going to have 3 races per weekend instead of 2. So we're going to get a heck of a lot more racing, which is really, really good. More storylines, more changes in the grid ranking because there's going to be more races going on, and more chance for these guys to be in supercars. You mentioned Chaz Mostert going and doing the IMSA race. He's been doing the GTs in Australia all season, as has Will Brown. So these guys are going to be in, their A1A job more often than not next year, which is really cool. I would imagine it's not. I don't think I've seen it being confirmed, but that Sydney round at the beginning of the season will be under lights because they've got that track fully floodlit. So. And we had the race earlier in the year, July, there under floodlights. So open it, good place to open it, big TV thing, prime time in Australian time, of course, under lights there at Sydney to kick off the season. I agree with you, Kobe. We shouldn't be going to Bathurst more than once, especially for a sprint race. Didn't really work, but the New South Wales government has got the deal with Supercars that they have to hold the first round of the championship in the state. So we go back to Sydney again. So although that might change with the upcoming Perth street race potentially being mooted as the opener for 26. So watch the space on that one. But I think it's positive. More races and an extra round. We can't complain.
I mean, look, more racing instantly is better, but I still feel like there's a couple of missed opportunities, especially when you consider just how strong of a bond not just NASCAR but American racing now has to supercar grown talent, and we could spend forever talking about places in America we'd love to see supercars go to. We've seen them at COTA before, but it's more than that, right? We've seen them in Bahrain, Shanghai, Yas Marina. Off the bat, Malaysia has not had a major racing event since Formula One left in 2017. Go to Sepang. Korea, nothing there in a decade since the Korean Grand Prix at Bood. And even then you got Everland Speedway. They are very much a area kind of void of large motorsports. So I think I could totally see something there. But again, we could spend forever talking about where we would want to see V8 supercars